She thought he was just the janitor, just a joke, until he touched the piano, and every millionaire in the room forgot to breathe. At a glittering gala, a billionaire tossed out a challenge meant only for laughs, until a young janitor stepped forward and played as if the night itself depended on him. The Crystal Bay Hotel ballroom shimmered under strands of golden lights, their glow spilling across polished marble floors until the space felt almost unreal. Guests in sleek gowns and tailored suits drifted between tables dressed in perfect white linen. Conversation hummed softly, mingling with the delicate chime of champagne glasses. In the far corner, a baby grand piano, its surface dulled by faint scuffs, sat quietly, looking almost forgotten among all the grandeur. Sabrina Lockage, 41, stood like a centerpiece in the middle of a cluster of donors and reporters. Her emerald dress caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled in effortless waves. Her smile was tailored for cameras. Known for her taste for drama and talent for turning passing moments into headlines, she was entirely in her element. With a tap of manicured fingers on the piano lid, she glanced at the circle around her. "You know," she said, her voice pitched just enough to pull in nearby ears. "If anyone here can play this piano flawlessly, I'll marry them tomorrow." It was not the kind of remark anyone took seriously, especially not at a black tie fundraiser. Light, indulgent laughter rippled through the crowd. A few guests traded knowing smiles. Classic Sabrina. Reporters leaned in slightly, already storing the line for later. Near the room's edge, Khalil Brantley was quietly refilling pitchers of ice water. At 27, he was the youngest janitor on staff and just 8 months into the job. His movements were steady, unobtrusive, until her words stopped him mid-step. He set the pitcher down and crossed the room toward the piano. "Do you mean that?" he asked, his voice low but clear enough to cut through the laughter. Heads turned. Sabrina looked at him, surprised, not so much by the question, but by who was asking it. She knew his face in that distant way you know the people who work in the background. Familiar, but nameless. "I suppose I do," she answered, tilting her head with a smirk. "Why? Planning to audition?" Amusement passed through the group like a small wave. "This should be interesting," someone whispered. Another guest chuckled, clearly expecting nothing more than a fleeting distraction. Khalil's expression didn't shift. He ran one hand lightly across the worn edge of the piano. "If you're serious," he said evenly, "let's see how serious you really are." The air in the room tightened, not enough to erase the laughter, but enough to make people lean closer. A reporter lifted their phone. One of the hotel managers edged forward, perhaps ready to intervene if things went too far. Sabrina, delighted by the sudden focus, motioned to the bench. "By all means," she said. "Show us what you've got." Khalil set aside his caddy, took a seat, and placed his hands on the keys. Against the polished black wood, his navy work shirt, with its neat embroidered hotel logo, looked almost out of place. He drew in a breath, poised his fingers, and paused. In the crowd, skeptical glances were exchanged. "This won't last," a man murmured. Another leaned toward his companion. 30 seconds, tops. Khalil either didn't hear or didn't care. His gaze stayed on the keys. The first notes were slow, deliberate, testing the instrument's voice. The sound wavered slightly, but he adjusted without hesitation, his touch steady and sure. Within seconds, the melody began to shift. His fingers moved faster, each note falling seamlessly into the next, fluid in a way that clashed with the idea of a janitor's hands. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. People lowered their phones without realizing it. What began as polite amusement was bending into something else entirely, something no one had seen coming. But the first crack in the mood came with the whispers, and these no longer carried a smile. From the back of the semicircle, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. "He probably only knows one song," she murmured. Her husband's eyes stayed locked on Khalil's hands, as if waiting for a slip. Near the buffet, 2 men in tailored suits smirked. One swirled the champagne in his half-empty glass. "Bet he plays chopsticks and calls it a day." They laughed openly. Khalil's expression didn't change. Shoulders relaxed, he swayed slightly to the rhythm, lost in a space entirely his own. The sound was warm, layered, far more intricate than anyone expected. The murmurs kept coming, but their certainty was fading. Where'd he learn that? A middle-aged man asked, brow furrowed. Probably YouTube, someone guessed, but without much confidence. Leaning against the piano, Sabrina tried to keep her smirk in place. The remark had been meant as a harmless spark, not an actual challenge. Yet with every phrase, she was studying him more closely. His posture, the control in his fingers, the way he allowed a pause before drawing the room back in. Not bad, she said casually, loud enough to be heard. Let's see if you can keep that up for more than a minute. Khalil didn't answer. His left hand deepened into a low, resonant chord progression, while his right skipped over the high keys with light, teasing precision. The music wove into something more complex, its patterns effortless but demanding. The young man with the champagne arched his brows. Okay, maybe not chopsticks. Across the room, a chef in a white jacket leaned in the service doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the scene. Waiters slowed, trays still in their hands. Now it wasn't just the wealthy watching. Staff had noticed, too. He's actually good, said a woman in a sequin navy gown, turning to Sabrina. Really good. Sabrina waved her hand lightly, still trying to appear unfazed. Talent can come from anywhere, she replied. But there was a tightness in her tone she hadn't planned on. Khalil slid into a section that fused tenderness with sudden bursts of force, playing that reached past the ear and into the chest. The notes filled the room, pressed into its walls, reshaped the air. Somewhere near the edge of the crowd, a man in a gray suit muttered, "Bet he still can't read sheet music." Khalil heard. He didn't look up, didn't falter, only climbed higher into the keys, striking a pure, ringing note before spinning back into the flow. In the front row, a woman with her arms folded asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" His voice came even. "Not here." The answer drew a few chuckles, lighter now, almost curious. It was the kind of reaction that meant people sensed a story they didn't know but suddenly wanted. Sabrina tapped the lid again, this time without the earlier smugness. "All right, surprise us," she said, as though trying to reclaim a game that had slipped out of her hands. Khalil's hands blurred across the keys, cascading through runs that seemed to test the piano's limits. The sustained pedal caught harmonies, let them linger, then shifted them into something new. The murmurs died completely. Smirks vanished. Even the man in the gray suit had straightened, silent now. Sabrina watched him as though measuring him against something invisible. The real change came when the first person stopped seeing a janitor and started seeing an artist. Khalil's fingers moved as if the piano had always been part of him, each motion precise, each phrase flowing like water over stone. His gaze stayed on the keys, but his mind seemed somewhere far beyond this ballroom. The piece slowed into a minor key that tightened the bass rumbled deep, the higher notes floated like fragments of a memory. This wasn't just performance. It was storytelling. Every chord was a sentence. Every run, a paragraph building toward something neither he nor they could name until it was there. Guests leaned in. A woman in crimson clasped her hands, her bracelet catching the light. Even the waitstaff in the back had stilled completely. And then, without warning, Khalil pivoted. His right hand erupted into a flurry of crisp, rapid notes, his left rolling deep thunder through the bass. The contrast lit the air like a storm, light against dark, soft against force. Sabrina felt her breath tighten, though she would never admit it aloud. She'd been surrounded by wealth, power, and spectacle her entire life. But moments this raw, this unpolished, were rare. The shift in the room was almost physical, quickening her pulse. From somewhere behind the crowd came a murmur. "That's Rachmaninoff." Another voice countered. "No. Listen, he's weaving in something else. That's his own." Khalil's eyes shut briefly as his fingers moved with greater urgency, the melody bending, twisting, testing its own edges. No one in the audience could tell if they were hearing a classical piece they ought to recognize or something entirely new. All they knew was that it was pulling them closer. Midway through, his left hand struck a series of chords so deep and resonant the floor seemed to hum. The sustained pedal caught the vibration, holding it until it felt as though the music had seeped beneath their feet. Sabrina shifted, crossing one ankle over the other, leaning slightly toward the woman beside her. "I didn't think he'd be this good," she murmured. The woman simply nodded, her eyes fixed on Khalil. Then he pivoted, softening into a lullaby-like refrain, intimate and breakable, as if heard through a closed door late at night. The silence between the notes felt just as important as the notes themselves. People held their breath, afraid the smallest sound might shatter it. With a quiet lift of his hands, Khalil revived the piece, letting the melody climb higher and higher. The chords below pressed harder, urgent, as though chasing something only he could see. In the front row, a man in his 60s lowered his phone. He had been recording since the first note, but now, for the first time, he simply wanted to listen. Khalil's final sequence unfurled like a storm, his right hand spinning rapid arpeggios while his left pounded a heartbeat in the bass. His shoulders moved with the motion, but every note stayed in control. When the last note came, it didn't stop. It lingered, hanging in the air until the piano's resonance finally faded. Khalil's hands rested on the keys, head bowed slightly, letting the moment breathe before anyone dared speak. Then came the eruption, not polite applause but cheers, whistles, clapping that went on and on. Some guests rose to their feet. Others stared at him as if uncertain what they had just witnessed. Sabrina clapped with the rest, though her mind was already racing. What had started as a flippant remark had become a performance that commanded a roomful of millionaires. She stepped forward, her voice softer now. That wasn't what I expected. Her eyes searched his face for something she couldn't name. Khalil looked at her at last, calm as ever. Most things worth remembering aren't, he replied. The quiet approval that followed was small, but real. The applause gave way to hushed, animated conversations in every corner. Guests leaned toward one another, speaking in quick, low tones as if they'd just seen something they weren't sure how to categorize. Sabrina remained near the piano, still reading him. She was used to holding the narrative in her hands. Now it felt like the story had shifted to his. A woman in her 50s, wrapped in silver silk, stepped closer. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked. "At home," Khalil said. "Old upright my mom bought for $50 from a church. Keys chipped, a few broken. It was enough to teach myself." The woman's smile deepened. "Well, it worked." From the side, a tuxedoed man cut in, half curious, half dismissing. "So no conservatory, no training, just figured it out?" Khalil met his eyes briefly. "Figuring it out is the training." A laugh escaped from somewhere in the back, and even Sabrina's lips curved. Then the hotel's general manager appeared, resting a hand on Khalil's shoulder. "How long have you worked here?" 8 months, Khalil replied. "And you've been hiding this the whole time?" "I wasn't hiding anything," Khalil said, steady as ever. No one ever asked. The answer landed with unexpected weight. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Sabrina tilted her head. "You know, I think you've just made me break my own rule." "What rule?" "Never be upstaged at my own event." This time, the laughter was warm. A reporter from the Charlotte Observer stepped forward, phone raised. "Khalil, can I get a quick video? Your name, where you're from." "This is going to get a lot of attention." Khalil hesitated. "I'd rather the video speak for itself." The reporter blinked, then nodded. From the back, someone called out, "Play another." Voices echoed the request. Khalil smiled faintly, but shook his head. One was enough. Sabrina regarded him for a long beat. "Then I suppose you'll leave them wondering." He rose, and the crowd instinctively parted. Some shook his hand, others offered praise, some heartfelt, some for form. Khalil took them all with the same calm nod. Sabrina watched him walk toward the service hallway. For someone so used to controlling a room, she was surprised to see how easily he'd claimed it without trying. She wasn't sure if she admired it or resented it. Near the door, a young waiter caught up. "Man, I didn't know you played." "That was insane." Khalil's faint smile returned. "It's just something I've always done." The waiter grinned. "Sounds like a lifetime's work." Khalil didn't answer immediately. Adjusting the strap of his caddy, he finally said, "Maybe it is." Then he disappeared through the heavy swinging door. Back at the piano, the room still buzzed, guests talking about him, the performance, and the fact that the night's most unforgettable moment had come from the janitor. Sabrina knew the clip would be online before she got home. A man leaned in. "You realize this is going viral, right?" "I'd be surprised if it isn't already," she replied. But she knew the real conversation was just beginning. By the time her driver pulled up at her high-rise, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts from colleagues, social media notifications, missed calls from her publicist. One of the first messages read, "Is this your gala?" The piano guy. A link followed, a shaky phone video, but it caught everything. His first steps toward the piano, the skeptical smiles, the silence, the eruption of applause. In under 3 hours, it had over 300,000 views. By morning, it would be in the millions. Instagram hashtags multiplied, hashtag piano janitor, hashtag hidden genius, hashtag Khalil Brantley. Some posts praised him as proof that talent needs no stage. Others focused sharply on the room's initial dismissal of him. On TikTok, a popular creator stitched the video with commentary. You can see the moment they realized they underestimated him. Thousands tagged friends. Watch to the end. Worth it. By 10 a.m., Khalil's name trended alongside global headlines. A screenshot of Sabrina's stunned expression circulated widely, captioned, "When you challenge the wrong guy." Meanwhile, Khalil sat in his small apartment above a laundromat, an old laptop glowing with unread notifications. A high school friend messaged, "You're everywhere. Start a YouTube channel." Khalil rubbed the back of his neck. Fame had never been the goal. Music was personal, shared only with friends or at the occasional open mic. Now strangers were dissecting it. At the hotel, the general manager fielded interview requests. National outlets called. A Los Angeles morning show wanted him live. Sabrina, coffee in hand, listened as her publicist said briskly, "This is an opportunity. Get ahead of it. People love the clip, but some don't like how the room reacted. You need to respond, publicly support him." "I am supportive," Sabrina said. "I told him to play. I didn't stop him." "That's not how the internet works," her publicist replied dryly. "We should arrange a meeting, photos, maybe a follow-up performance." Sabrina stared out at the skyline. "He's not a prop. If he wants to, fine. If not, I'm not forcing it." Khalil scrolled through comments. Most were kind, some skeptical, calling it a stunt. Later that day, a journalist from the Charlotte Ledger asked, "Do you plan to pursue music full-time?" "I haven't decided," Khalil said. "I've always liked playing, but a viral video shouldn't decide my life." Then what should people take away from this? That you don't know someone just by looking at them. And maybe that talent doesn't come with a dress code. By evening, the clip had hit national television. Anchors introduced it as the performance that stopped a gala in its tracks. Critics weighed in. Former guests called the hotel, claiming they'd known all along he was gifted, despite what the footage showed. Others asked if he'd be performing again. Sabrina knew the story had grown far beyond her. Her inbox brimmed with invitations to speak on hidden talent and class perception. But she also knew only Khalil could decide what happened next. The real shift wasn't in the view count. It was in the question now on everyone's lips. Who is Khalil Brantley? And that question was about to lead them both somewhere neither expected. 2 days later, Khalil sat in a quiet corner of Marlowe's coffee house, just off Main Street. The morning rush long past. He'd agreed to meet Sabrina, not in front of cameras, not at the hotel, but here. She'd insisted on keeping it private. She arrived 5 minutes late, sliding into the chair opposite him with an apologetic smile. "Traffic," she said, setting her leather tote on the floor. Khalil nodded. "No problem." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine and the soft current of background jazz filled the space between them. Sabrina leaned forward, elbows resting on the cafe table. "I owe you an apology," she said without ceremony. "That night, I turned you into a punchline without thinking, and you turned it into something I never saw coming." Khalil met her eyes without flinching. "I didn't do it to prove you wrong." "I know," she admitted, a wry edge in her voice, "which somehow makes it more humiliating for me." He exhaled softly, almost a laugh. "You were just talking. People do that, say things without realizing how they land. I've been on the other side of it plenty of times." Sabrina stirred the coffee she'd just ordered, the spoon clinking faintly against porcelain. "You're playing, it wasn't just good. It felt lived in, like you've been carrying it around for years." "I have," Khalil said. "Started when I was 10. My mom found this old piano at a church sale. She didn't play a note herself, but figured I might. Guess she was right. What about lessons? Couldn't afford them. Learned by listening, copying, messing up, trying again. Sometimes I'd sneak into the community center on Saturdays. They had a decent upright. I'd play until the janitor kicked me out." Sabrina's mouth curved in a half smile. "And now, you're the janitor." "Yeah," Khalil grinned. "Funny how that works." Her expression softened. Why not chase it professionally? He leaned back, fingers curling around his mug. Life happened. Mom got sick when I was 17. Bills piled up. Music doesn't pay much unless you're lucky or connected. I took jobs that kept the lights on. Piano stayed with me, but it's always been mine. Private. Sabrina nodded, turning his words over in her mind. That performance, it meant something to people. I've had strangers message me saying it reminded them of their dad, their childhood, or dreams they'd let go of. Khalil looked toward the window, watching the street. That's nice, but I don't want this to turn into some viral pity story. I'm not looking to be rescued. I'm not here to rescue you, she said, leaning forward. I'm asking if you want a stage, the kind you deserve. His gaze came back to hers. And if I don't, then nothing changes, she said with a shrug. You keep playing when and where you want. But right now, you've got an opening most people never get. If you say yes, I can put you in front of an audience that will actually listen. He didn't answer immediately. His mind drifted to the chipped piano in their living room, to his mother humming while folding laundry. You're telling stories without words, she used to say. She'd have wanted him to share those stories. But sharing meant letting the world in. Sabrina seemed to sense the hesitation. I won't push. Just think about this. Your music already broke through in a room full of people who weren't listening. Imagine what it could do for people who are. Khalil set his cup down. I'll think about it. They lingered a while longer, not just about the gala, but about her foundation, his work at the hotel, and how sometimes the spotlight finds you when you're not looking for it. When they finally stood, Sabrina reached out her hand. Whatever you decide, you've got my respect. That's not something I give lightly. I'll keep that in mind, he said, shaking her hand. Neither of them knew the decision was about to be made for. 3 days later, Khalil was back at the Crystal Bay Hotel, pushing his cleaning cart through the banquet hallway when the front desk clerk appeared, slightly out of breath. You've got a visitor, she said. I'm working. She's not leaving until you talk to her. In the lobby, a woman in her late 30s, denim jacket, toddler on her hip, turned toward him. Her eyes lit up. You don't know me, she began. But I saw your video. Twice, actually. She adjusted the boy in her arms. My son here doesn't talk much yet, but when I played your piano clip, he sat still and listened the whole way through. That never happens. Khalil glanced at the boy, whose wide eyes stayed locked on him. That's nice to hear. It's more than nice, the woman's voice trembled. My husband passed last year. We've been adjusting. That music, it was the first time in months my home felt peaceful. I know you didn't do it for us, but it mattered. For a moment, he had no words. Finally, I'm glad it found you when you needed it. When she left, he wheeled his cart back toward the service hallway. But something had shifted. Until now, the viral video had felt like something happening to him. Now it felt like something he could choose to shape. That evening, he called Sabrina. If the offer's still on the table, he said, I'll take the stage. 2 weeks later, they stood together backstage at the Uptown Theater in Dallas. Sabrina had arranged for him to headline her foundation's national benefit concert. The crowd was a mix, donors, local families, and reporters eager to see if the so-called piano janitor could deliver. Khalil paced, palms warm. Feels different than the gala, he said. Because this time, Sabrina replied, they came for you. When his name was announced, he stepped into the spotlight to applause that already felt warmer than the polite clapping at the hotel. He sat at the gleaming Steinway, took a breath, and began. His opening piece, his own composition, carried gospel warmth stitched with classical precision, melodies swelling like a tide. The theater fell into that rare, heavy silence of total attention. When the last note dissolved, applause burst forward. Between pieces, he spoke briefly. Most people will only ever know you from a few seconds they see. That's never the whole story. We all carry something bigger inside us. Sometimes you just need the right moment to let it out. He played for 40 minutes, ending with the same piece from the gala. The ovation was immediate, on their feet this time. In the wings, Sabrina clapped, a genuine smile lighting her face. Afterward, in the lobby, people came up to him, not just with compliments, but with their own confessions, of guitars left in closets, of canvases gathering dust, of talents once believed worthless. By night's end, Khalil realized his music was no longer just his refuge. It had become a bridge. Outside, Sabrina caught up to him. You know, you could make this a career. Maybe, Khalil said. But even if I don't, I've learned something. What's that? That what you carry matters. Even if no one sees it at first. Even if they laugh. He glanced back at the theater doors where the last guest slipped out. Sometimes the right moment comes when you're not asking for it. You just have to be ready. Sabrina nodded. Then the rest is up to you. Always has been, he said. The night air was cool as he walked toward the waiting car. He didn't know if this was the start of something big or just a story he'd tell someday. But he knew one thing for certain. His music wasn't staying hidden anymore. And if you've been holding on to something you love, music, writing, painting, anything, don't wait for the perfect stage. Share it. You never know whose life it might change, including your own. If this moment gave you chills, smash that subscribe so you never miss the next story, and drop a comment. What hidden talent would leave the world speechless if they saw it?